Hello, hello. If you're watching this, you might notice right away that very different layout this time compared to my other solution videos I've done so far. This is the layout I use when I'm streaming on Twitch, which I don't do super duper often, but I'm trying to do a little more recently because I've been doing more casual gaming. Bought a couple games lately, so figured why not use it for these videos going forward, just to increase the quality a little bit. It's also an excuse to get the webcam on, because I've been quite lazy the last few solution videos. Didn't feel like turning the webcam on. I would feel kind of bad doing that here without having the webcam as well. So, this is for the puzzle Sorry That Sum Is Taken, which was not the original title. There wasn't really actually a title for this in the first place, because it was a Secret Santa puzzle that I made for fellow setter Sudoku, who, for the record, check him out. He's one of my favorite setters. I've solved most of his one-star puzzles. They're all very good quality. I'm sure the harder ones are are also equally interesting, but I'm only a 1 to 2 star solver myself, so I stick to those ones. Yeah, so it was a Secret Santa puzzle for him. That got revealed recently. He gave me permission to post it as a standalone thing here, so I have done that now. So, let's take a look here. Font is a little weird. Let me zoom in on that. I had to do some wacky stuff to my Chrome to get this to fit into the layout nicely, but... So we have a couple standard rules for the most part. Region sum lines are, as usual, I'm skipping over cages for a second, but if you're familiar with region sum lines, we separate the line into segments whenever it enters a new box in the grid. So we end up with, let's say, green there, pink here, maybe orange here, something like that. So that's because when we split into a new box border, or a new box, we're saying this is now a separate portion of this line. And we're saying each of these colors, so the 2 cells in orange, the 2 cells in pink, and the 5 cells in green, must all sum to the same number. So that is what we're saying for region sum lines. And now, it did say killer cages, but you might notice they're a little weird. There's a lot of them that don't have totals, and most of the ones that do have kind of totals, so to speak, they're not actually totals, they're inequalities. So that is saying less than 19, greater than 14, etc. So it's basically what you would expect. It just means that they are summing to a certain number, but you don't get told what that number is exactly. You're given partial information, and it's saying that these are all strict inequalities as well, so none of these are less than or equals to or greater than or equals to. They're strictly less than or greater than. Unless it's these ones, which don't have any sum at all. Which would seem like they kind of serve no purpose exactly, but we do have one more, technically two more, but one more major rule to go over, and that is what I'm calling sum uniqueness. And it's saying each sum can appear at most once in the puzzle. This rule applies to killer cages and region sum lines. And that is, just to clarify, you wouldn't be summing with dots, but it's just to be clear that it's only really affecting the lines and cages. It says, for example, if a region sum line is determined to have its segments sum to 6, then no other line can do the same, and no cages may sum to 6 either. So, exactly what it sounds like. You know, if we worked out that this one sums to 15, nothing else in the grid can sum to 15. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't have, say, 2 numbers here sum to 15, but the point is you couldn't have another cage or line sum to 15, because it only is applying to stuff within those clues, I guess you could say, constraints. Classic Sudoku, no problem. Finally, crop dots, we have a single occurrence of a white dot over here, so these 2 cells must be consecutive, and a single occurrence of a black dot over here, meaning one of these digits is double the other. And so with that, let's restart. I think the timer's cut off on the layout anyways, so it doesn't really matter, but... So, the way we can begin this is... I'm going to recommend, if you don't already use it, the killer calculator comes very much in handy in this sort of puzzle. You could also just either do this all in your head, if you're good with that, or you could like pull out a physical notepad, or even notepad the program on your computer. I think it's easiest to just use the calculator here. Not to necessarily care about the options per se, but to think about the sums. Now, if you're here, you probably are familiar with cages already and region sum lines already, so it shouldn't be a big shock to tell you that 2 cell cages cannot sum to anything bigger than 17. That's because 8 and 9 together gives you 17. So this is pretty restricted, as you can see, because greater than 14 really only leaves us with 15, 16, or 17 as an option. Same with this cage. And we don't know which is which, or which combination of these exists. What we do know is there's one other part of the grid that is pretty similarly constrained. So this would be a chance to stop and try and spot that yourself first. Maybe pause for a second. And now we can look at what that actually looks like. So what we have is box 1 up here. We have 5 cells here, and then 2 cells here. So if we use minimum maximum logic a little bit, if we think minimum 5 cells means at minimum this would sum to 15, and at maximum this could sum to 17. So what I've really given here is I've basically given you another cage that says greater than 14. It's effectively what's happening up here, except we also have this 5 cell part, because this must be within the range of 15 to 17, just like the others. And so that on its own doesn't really mean a whole lot, but when you take that into account with these two as well, we now have 3 things on the grid that sum to 15, 16, or 17. But each one can only be one of them, because we can't repeat the sums. So the power of that is nothing else on the grid can now sum to 15, 16, or 17, because it would make it impossible to fill all 3 of these with unique sums. So maybe we can look over to one of the other parts, like this cage here, which says less than 19. That already is pretty restricted, down to 15, 16, 17, or 18, and it now can't be 3 of those. I'm going to click all of these, but that's enough for there. So this must be an 18-cell 5 cage. Now you could certainly do some math from there on maybe what the total of these must be. I'm going to say that's probably not going to get us anywhere, and by probably I mean it won't. So I would say don't bother with that. Just as like a small tip, I guess. You don't need to think about that at all here. At least not until we know the exact layout of this, because we can know the sum of these, but it's still going to be ambiguous what digits that is made up of. Once we know what 5 digits these are, it's a little more helpful to then think about what's left over. But more importantly than this cage, which, I mean, we know the sum, but it's a little ambiguous. We know there's going to be a 1, 2, 4 in it. But more importantly than that, we have these other cages that are greater than 12, which now can't be 15, 16, 17. Again, must be greater than 12. So we're looking at 13 and 14 in some order here. Now, similarly, we could say, well, no matter which one is which, it doesn't really matter. This now can't be 13 or 14. Also can't be the ones that were higher than it. But it is greater than 10. So this final one here is either 11 or 12. And now it's not possible to immediately work that out right now, but we do need to go back to the greater than 12 cages. This one, still ambiguous. Cross out a couple others here. This one, however, is knowable, because this must be 2 consecutive digits summing to whatever the total is. So there's sort of 2 ways you can think about this. You could just recognize right away that the only way to make any of these options work is 6, 7, to make 13. But even earlier in the puzzle, you also could have thought about it from the perspective of any white dot combination of 2 digits is going to sum to an odd number. So you already could have ruled out a bunch of these sums kind of right away. And you could say, well, this must be 13 then, because it certainly couldn't sum to an even number. This must be 6, 7. That is the 13 sum, which means this one must be the 14 sum, which is either 5, 9, or 6, 8. We can now combine the 6, 7 cage here with the 8 cage that is the only given total cage, which I haven't pencil marked yet. It can't be 1, 7, and it can't be 2, 6 anymore, so it must be 3, 5. So now this is going to have a lot of impact on this region sum line up here, because now the minimum these 3 cells could be would be 1, 2, 4, and the minimum these would then be is 3, 6. And so if you think about if you try to increase any of these numbers at all, you immediately run into problems. If we tried to increase any of these numbers, we wouldn't be able to increase any of them unless we went up to 8 or 9, I think. Yeah. Because if you make the 1 bigger, it would go to a 2. 2 bigger would go to a 3, which it can't be. And if you try to really make anything bigger, you're going to have to way overshoot. Because if you make the 4 bigger, it can't be 5, 6, or 7. And if you do any of that, you're going to overshoot the possible sum for this. So these 3 must be 1, 2, 4 no matter what. And you certainly couldn't increase any of this, because there is no other option for a black dot that's higher than 1, 2, 4. So this gives us definitively this region sum line sums to 16. The only way to make 16 in 2 cells is with a 7, 9 pair. And so we have 7, 9s pointing down into this middle cage here. And so that is going to take out 7 as an option from here, which still doesn't tell us which one it is, but it at least takes 7 out. What that also means is 7 must go down here now, somewhere in this cage. Also the same with 9 as well. 9 could never have been in the 18 cage anyways. So, in order to continue now, we need to do a little more classic Sudoku of it. So we have column 1 is missing 8 and 9. This cannot be a 9 because of a 7-9 pair, so that must be, I have corner mark selected, 8 and 9. Also, now that we have this worked out to be 7 and 9, summing to 16, we know that these two cannot be 16. So we have 15 and 17. One is one, one is the other. So we could pencil mark in 6, 7, 8, 9s, because it'll be some combination of that. This can't be a 9. And that is going to tell us that this one is not the 17 sum, because if it was a 17 sum, it would need to have a 9 in it. So this must be the 15, and it must be made of 7, 8, to avoid clashing with the 9. This one must be the 17 option, made of 8, 9. We can now move up to row 1 and take advantage more of this information. We have a 3, 6 in the row now, so this cannot be 6, 8, must be 5, 9. Now we have a lot of information looking at this cage now, which we haven't really focused on until this point. It either was 11 or 12, and you're going to find that only one of these options is actually possible. Not just the sum, but even just cage combination. So if we just focus on the row as well as the 7-9 pair here, this cannot be 2, 9, it cannot be 3, 8, it cannot be 4, 7, it cannot be 5, 6, it cannot be 3, 9, and it also cannot be 5, 7. So this must be a 12 sum made of 4 and 8. 4, 8 in the row takes out 4 from over here, and it leaves us with needing 1, 2, and 7 left over in the row. This cannot be a 7 because of the pair here, so this now becomes a 1, 2 pair, gives us 7 in the corner. So that is a fair bit of deductions gotten just from working out that 15, 16, 17 triple, and how that kind of cascaded into the other cages. This is sort of the end of the first stage of the puzzle, I would say. And I was kind of stuck here for a decent bit when I was setting the puzzle. Some of these clues obviously were not there at that point. I was still building out the solve path, but the initial clues I put down, as you can see, all kind of flowed together into each other and kind of resolved nicely into getting these 3 digits, the 7, 8, and 9. And so the way we continue this now is to do what I did, of coming across the fact that I hadn't considered the power of single cell cages at that point in the setting of this. And so I've realized we had limitations on 7 in box 5 here. And I really like the idea of just putting a cage underneath this 7, so that way you have to have done all of that early work to get the 7 up here to be able to continue. And the reason that's powerful is we now cannot have 7 on any of these, because you would be repeating the sum. Now it's a little weird in the case of this, because we would kind of be considering it a sum when it's not really summing multiple numbers. But 7 on a single cell region sum line is technically a singular cell summing to 7. So we cannot repeat 7 on any of these. We must have a 7 in the center, which will give us 8, 7, 4, and 8 here. Takes out 4 from there. And now we also have 2 8s looking at the middle box here. So 8 must go over here. And that is proving there must be an 8 in the cage. So this must be 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 cage. With the 8 on this side here. And further, we can now say, just kind of by process of elimination there, that this must be 5, 6, 9 in some order. And then this is the secondary effect of placing these clues like this, is we now have 5, 6, and 9 that the other region sum lines cannot sum to. Look at 5, 6, 9 here. We can maybe ask what's over here. We need a 1, 2, 4, and a 6. Which means these must be 1, 2, 4, 6. We can also get another classic Sudoku option here, which is going to prove to be a very powerful step. I was very lucky when I just happened to spot this, that this was possible at this stage. 7 cannot go in any of these spots, and it can't go here. So 7 must be on the blue line here. And as soon as 7 is on the line, it must sum to something bigger than 7. And the only option for that over here is with a 9 on it. And for 7 to sum to 9, it needs a 2, 7 pair. 8 and 9 over here. That gives us the 8 in this cage over here. 2, 7 takes out 2 from here, and 6, 5, 6 takes out 6 from here. So this is a 1, 4 pair there. 2, 6 takes out 2 from there. Now maybe ask what this other one must be, because we're starting to run pretty low on sums that are possible at this point. We have used up 1, 4, 5, 6, 9, and a bunch of other things. So let's just type in the options here. We have Can't be 7, 8, 9, or any of those. It can't be 1, can't be 5 or 6. This must be 2 or 3 to match with that. Seems like it can still be either at this point. I don't remember the exact order we're supposed to go through this all at this point. Oh, 2 must go here in this cage because you can't go there, so this must be double 3. Now 1, 2, 4 here, so 3 is there. 5 and 3 down here. We also have 5, 6 pair here. 5 and 6 looking over from here as well, so 5, 6 in this box must go there. Means this must be a 1 and a 6. Or not 1, 6, that is 1 and 4. This column over here, we have 1, 2, and 4, with 3, 7, 8, 9 looking here. So this must be 5, 6 at the bottom. So now we can maybe, now that there's a lot of info in the grid pretty decently, we can maybe ask ourselves what this could be. So if this is a 5, then this would either need to be 1, 4, which it cannot be because it would break that. Or it would be a 2, 3, which does not work because there's a 3 in the column. So this must be something to 6. Double 5s here. 9, 5 there. 6, 5 here. And now we can ask again, well, this is either 1, 5 or 2, 4, and it's certainly not 5 because this 5's right there. This is 2, 4, which means that is double 1, that's double 4. 2 and 4 over here. 1, 2, and 4 up here. 2 there. 1 in the corner. I'm getting pretty close to the end now. Just gonna have to do a lot of classic logic for a bit now. Keep asking ourselves what the options are in each of these areas. 3 and 9 in some order there. 1 and 5 there, with 6 over here. Trying to find where the next spot to... Oh, we haven't looked at what this could possibly be. We need... It's either 1, 8, which it's not. 2, 7, it's not. 3, 6, it could be. And it's not 4, 5, so that must be 3, 6. And similarly here, this is either 1, 5 or 2, 4, and we have a 5 in the box already. So now that puts this cell under a lot of pressure, because we need 1, 7, 8, 9 in this cage, and this cannot be 7, 8, or 9. Sorry, in this box. That must be a 1. With 7, 8, 9 in this cage here. This column is now missing only a couple things here. There's a 2 and a 4. And cleverly, I'm very lucky I was able to find this as a solution for this. At the end, I kind of found that this was a deadly pattern, and I kind of panicked a little bit. But then I found and realized I had never used 2 as a singular sum. So if you put a cage under this, it can't be a 4 because we have a 4 sum already. So that means this must be 2, 4, 2, 4 like that. That leaves us with 1, 3, 6, 8 up here. Can't have 6 in any of those spots. We can't have 3 in those spots. So that gives us 1, 8 pair left over. Down this bottom row, we need 3, 5, and 6. And we cannot have a 6 from the 6, 7 pair here, so that must be 6 and 5 here. Now we have 1, 2, and 8 left over as well. 2 and 1 there, 6 and 2 here. 8 comes out from there. We also have 3, 6 worked out up there, which gives us 3, 5 down here. Now the only thing left in the grid that's not pencil marked is this, which must be 5, 7, 8, 9. And so at this point, this is as far as you can get with just classic Sudoku, and kind of using all the other clues. And there's a couple things we haven't really paid any attention to yet, because they weren't valuable until this point, which is this cage here, and this cage. So those are ambiguous, totally ambiguous sum cages that have not actually been helpful. Haven't even really paid attention to them. But we now know what 2 of them sum to. This is the only one that's still ambiguous even with its digits. But this one is 7, 8, 9, which means it is summing to 24. And this one is 1, 3, 4, 6, 8. Let's see if I can find that in the list. There's. 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, meaning this sums to 22. So there's sort of two ways you could look at this. You could say, well, this now cannot be 22 or 24. So what could it possibly sum to, using 5, 7, 8, and 9 in some order? I prefer to think of this a little more elegantly, I guess, by thinking a little more directly about if you put a 5 here, then this becomes a 7, 8, 9 cage, which clashes with this. So we definitely cannot put a 5 outside of it. We must have a 5 in the cage directly. And that alone is going to already work out a bunch of stuff here. That's going to give 8 and 1 here, 4, 1 here, 7, 9, 8, 2, 4. Conflict checker makes this super quick to do. That gives 7, 9 pair here, gives an 8 here. So just that little bit of logic already is enough to get that far, but we do need to now think about this cage up here. I probably would not have even bothered having this cage here if that was going to be enough. I really tried to make sure I gave only the info that was necessary. So we now have to think about this cage because this is still ambiguous between 5, 7, 8 and 5, 8, 9. And so we think this sums to 22. If we have 8 and 5 here, that brings us to 13. If we put a 9 with that, we would get to 22 again, which we are not allowed to have. So this must be a 7. And that breaks up the remaining digits. That gets us to the end. So yeah, I was really proud of this with the way it came out. You know, I've made somewhere around like mid-20s, I think, in terms of number of puzzles so far. This is probably one of the ones I'm most proud of and most happy with. I feel like it flows really smoothly. It also feels like a pretty original idea. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had the idea of this, like, some uniqueness sort of idea. But I didn't get the idea, like, from anyone. I kind of just thought of it. It was spawned again as Secret Santa. The original idea kind of sparked from the Sudoku mentioning some of their favorite rules are killer cages and region sumlines. And after staring at the grid enough, I just thought of it as a cool way to combine the two rules together. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope this helped.